Hi, are you a foreigner looking to buy property in Serbia? Maybe you're looking for what sort of red flags to look for when you're searching for property. Or maybe you're looking for a step-by-step guide for searching, buying, paying for your property, signing contracts, the costs associated with those, property tax refunds that you possibly might qualify for. Then you're definitely at the right place. So if you watch my previous video, I have recently bought an apartment here in Kragujevac. For those of you who don't know, that's in central Serbia. It's a new development by Grading and is currently under construction. And I really couldn't have done it all without the help of my lawyers, Tamara and Alex. As a result, I've decided to create a video for other foreigners who are looking to buy property here in Serbia to explain the whole process of going from searching for a property to getting the keys. However, I am not a professional when it comes to the law and the laws associated with buying property here in Serbia. So I decided to make a video with the help of my lawyers, Alex and Tamara, and the three of us together, mixing in with our personal experience, will try to help you as a foreigner buy property for yourself here in Serbia.
My name is Tamara Salazar. I'm an attorney at law qualified in Serbia. I've been practicing in the legal field for the past 15 years. Besides that, I'm also a court certified translator for English and French languages. Not everybody is eligible to acquire real estate property in Serbia. There are certain countries that do not have reciprocity rules with Serbia. If Serbian citizens cannot acquire property in that country, people from those countries cannot acquire property in Serbia either. I would suggest as a first step before acquiring real estate or even thinking about acquiring real estate in Serbia is to check the list of countries that have bilateral agreements with Serbia where this reciprocity rule applies. In order to do so, you can access the website of the Serbian Ministry of Justice. There is a page which pertains to foreign citizens and more precisely the reciprocity rules, and provides a very exhaustive list of all the countries whose citizens are eligible to buy property in Serbia.
Hello everyone, my name is Alexander Filin and I'm an attorney at law and I've been practicing law since 2013. In general, foreigners can buy a residential property, that is houses, apartments. There is a general rule that foreigners are not entitled to buy agricultural land, but there is an exception which applies to EU citizens under certain conditions. Those citizens need to have a permanent residence in the territory of Serbia for 10 years. They need to be acquiring a maximum of 2 hectares of land. They need to have cultivated that particular land that they wish to buy for at least 3 years, and they must have a registered agricultural holding.
If a foreign citizen is married to a Serbian citizen, then they can acquire any type of land without any of these prior conditions that Alex mentioned. So basically, if a foreign citizen is willing to buy agricultural land, then they can do that through their Serbian spouse, who according to the laws are not forbidden from buying any type of immovable property in Serbia. Acquiring property in Serbia allows you to obtain temporary residence. After 3 years of temporary residence, you can also apply for permanent residency, and then down the line, if you decide to make Serbia your permanent place of residence, you can apply for Serbian citizenship. So as a starting point, we would suggest checking out for online offer and visiting some of the biggest websites in Serbia. The first one that I would recommend is City Expert.
City Expert is good because it's also available in English. You have the option to look for rentals and also for sales. Basically, you have a map. You can choose different parts of town. You can zoom down, you can click on a particular apartment, and you can have a more detailed look where you can see the information on the layout of the apartment, what the price is, what the conditions are, what are the expenses, amenities, whether there are any similar listings to this one.
The good thing about City Expert is that they do not charge any fees for potential buyers, so it's the seller who's covering most of the costs of advertising and the costs agent fees. The second website that we would suggest is Četiri zida, also a very good selection of real estate on offer. And thirdly, nekretnine.rs.
The next step would be to contact the agent, having a look at the place itself, so going for a visit and asking for the relevant documentation which relates to that real estate. What you need to do is to get the complete address of the apartment. So you will need to know the street number, and if it's apartment buildings, you will need to know the apartment number in order to be able to find that particular apartment at the cadastre and to be able to check out its legal status. Who is registered as the owner, whether there are any encumbrances or whether there are any other potential legal issues. A cadastre is a state institution which is charged with keeping a registry of all the real estate in Serbia and also the registry of all property rights owners over those real estates. So, for example, you buy an apartment and you want to become the owner. The final legal step which you need to do in order to fully and formally become the owner of that apartment is to submit before the cadastre office your request to be inscribed as the owner. So essentially the cadastre is the place where your inscription there confirms that you're definitely the owner, and it's an open registry, so anyone can access the registry and check the information on the real estate they are thinking of buying, and they can see what is its legal status, who is its current owner, whether there are any encumbrances, whether there are any disputes over the ownership. In a later segment of this video, we will also be showing you how you can go to the website of the cadastre and how you can do a little bit of your own research once you find some real estate that you're interested in, so you can do a little bit of your own small due diligence as to what the situation is there. Acquiring real estate can be a bit of a legal tangle, and there are some red flags you should really try to avoid when choosing which real estate you want to buy. First of all, there are a lot of real estate which are simply not registered, in the sense that they're not inscribed in the cadastre.
Buildings that were built in the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s that we qualify as divlja gradnja or wild construction. Those are entire buildings which have been constructed without obtaining prior construction permits and later on usage permits, which now means that you have entire buildings with separate units within, which are not registered anywhere. Obviously, you can still live in those buildings, you can own them, there's not a problem per se. The only problem is if you're willing to part with that property in such a building, you're going to face problems selling it. A lot of people are going to be reluctant to buy such an apartment because then they would be facing the same situation of not being able to register their apartment in the cadastre because such apartments and entire buildings do not legally exist anywhere.
So I was looking for a property here in Kragujevac. On the website when we were searching, it actually came up as a registered property, but then when we later inquired, the agent told us that the property was actually unregistered and that they had forgotten to tell us when we had come for the inspection. With the help of Alex and Tamara, we found out later that nothing in that area was registered. So not only did the property not exist, but also the street did not exist. Be aware that it is not uncommon that this happens.
There are many cases of unresolved succession issues, so the registered owner is someone who has died years ago and the probate proceedings hadn't been completed, or there may be situations where the ownership is in dispute. There are situations where there are some encumbrances like mortgages over the real estate in general. You can have situations of non-legalized objects, so that legalization is currently ongoing.
A couple of years back when I was looking for a place in Belgrade with my husband, one of the properties that we were interested in was actually a property in a building that consisted of two separate units. So one was the main unit, the apartment, and the second unit was actually a converted attic space. To provide you a little bit of a background, attic spaces or underground spaces in the buildings, they're considered as mutual property of all tenants. So if one of the tenants wants to use it for their own private use, to convert it to something else, they need to acquire prior approvals from all the tenants, all separate unit owners in that building. I believe in this case they had done that, but that is not enough. Such converted space needs to also have a construction permit and usage permit in order for it to be fully legalized. And I believe what was lacking was one of those sets of papers, and so the unit was not properly legalized. So legally speaking, it does not really exist. And basically, the seller of these two units was offering both units for sale, which reflected obviously in the price, but legally speaking, you were buying just that one big apartment and not the converted attic space, because that converted attic space was never registered in the cadastre. Those are the things that you should look into and probably steer away from if you're not willing to put in the work of doing necessary legalizations afterwards, doing necessary registration with the state institutions, and just ultimately be clear with what you want to buy. Just buying the clear, unencumbered, registered property.
So when we found Sokolis, or the developer Grading, our lawyers double-checked it, triple-checked it to make sure that all the property was registered, that there were registered streets, that our unit was registered, and not only that, the agents were very down to earth and transparent. It was also such a relief to find something that was clean. And also because they are a reputable company here in Serbia, they have also built a bunch of different buildings here in Kragujevac, as well as a few in Belgrade that have all finished on time. We also double checked with other people that lived in these buildings, like what is the insurance like, what happens if something breaks. They had told us that Grading actually comes within a few days, fixes it immediately, and it was all covered by insurance, which lasts for 2 years after the signing of the sales and purchase agreement.
Here we're at the website of the cadastre, and essentially there are two types of searches that you can do. The default one is through something called Cadastre Municipalities, which I would say is a bit tricky and complicated, but there is the possibility to search via address, which I think is much simpler. So what you need to do in the previous step is to choose the municipality. So we'll take an example of a Belgrade municipality, Vračar, and then we click here, search by address. We type the street name, we type the street number, there's a CAPTCHA that you need to fill in, and then you get to this web page where you can access different kinds of information about the particular buildings. You can see it is divided into 3 sections. This is the first one, the second one, the third one. The first one relates to the land. The second one relates to the building in its entirety. The third one relates to the particular apartments in the building. Just as a short example, I will click on one of the apartments. All personal data, of course, will be blurred out, so you won't be able to see. Essentially, when you click on that one, you get the information on the land, you get the information on the building, and you, in the bottom of the page, you get the information on the particular apartment, where you can see who is the owner, and you can see whether there are any encumbrances or any other inscriptions that might potentially give cause for some concern. In this particular example where we clicked on, there are no encumbrances and there is nothing troubling. There's not a mortgage or anything of that sort. In case there is something, that would be listed here. We can look at another one from the same building. This is the section which relates to the apartment itself. It states who the owners are, and this one also shows that there is an encumbrance in this section that I'm outlining with the pointer, and it states that there is a mortgage which is inscribed. There are no details of the mortgage, of course, that is not provided in this public overview, but you can see that there is a mortgage over that particular apartment, which is something that you should definitely have in mind if you are purchasing some kind of property. This is something that's called a public search, and there you can see a limited data set. On the other hand, lawyers, they have their own account with the cadastre, and they can access more detailed information, which is also something that you can obtain when you go to the notary office and when you request an excerpt.
And you can do so by visiting any notary office and providing them either with the full address of the property or the cadastral lot number and additional information on the individual unit, and they will be able to give you a printout of the whole property containing all legal information on that property. So it's around €5 that you pay at the notary office at the time of requesting the excerpt, and it takes them just a few minutes to actually locate the excerpt online and then to do a full printout for you, as you do not need a prior appointment with the notary. You can further use that for your own due diligence, or you can send it to your lawyer for them to do additional due diligence prior to you deciding on purchasing the property.
If it's a mortgage, you would get more detailed information. This way you can only see that it exists, but nothing in detail as, in whose favor it's established, for what amount, etc. As lawyers, when we are reviewing a real estate, for example, if it's a situation that someone's, like a private person, is selling their own apartment, we would be getting all the documentation for review that person has with respect to the apartment. For example, if they bought it, we would get a chance to look at their sale and purchase agreement. Or if they inherited it, we would normally be able to review the decision of the court by which they were proclaimed to be the inheritors of that apartment. All the lawyers in Serbia need to be inscribed based on where they are located and where they're practicing law in one of the 7 regional bar associations. And on the websites of each of those associations, you can find a list of all the registered lawyers. However, having in mind that it is just basically a bare list that contains nothing but their name, phone number, and address, I don't think that practically it's going to be of much help, especially like in Belgrade, where there are a couple of thousand of registered practitioners. In my experience and experience of the people I know, in general, the best way to find a lawyer is to look for a recommendation from someone that you trust, a friend, an acquaintance, a business partner, whomever who went through this same process, who was buying real estate, or who knows someone who did, and that they had a lawyer that they were satisfied with. So I would say that a personal recommendation is probably the best. And I would say that having proper guidance by a practicing attorney in the process of acquiring real estate is very important, because the lawyer is in many ways the person who guides you through the entire process. They review the real estate in question, like everything that I was talking about, all those red flags. They will be the ones who will notice them and who will be able to tell you, look, this is not such a good idea, or this apartment is really good, the papers are clean. So they would be reviewing the contracts, whether everything is okay, whether there are some particularly unfavorable provisions. They would be involved in negotiating with the seller. It might be that there will be signed a pre-contract and the main contract, or you will only be signing the main contract. Those are like the 2 modalities of sale, how it's done in Serbia normally. In both of those scenarios, the lawyers would be looking both at the pre-contract, if it's there, and of course the main contract. And finally, the lawyer would be the one who would be the guiding you, like from the first step, when you've identified, an apartment you like and you're interested in, to that final step when you have finally agreed with the seller on the final text of the agreement, and when it's time to sign it before the notary public.
We've come to the part where you've decided to purchase the property and sign the sales and purchase agreement. According to the Serbian law, in order for the sales and purchase agreement to be legally effective, it needs to be solemnized or signed with the public notary. So the first step is to take an appointment. This type of signing is not something that you can do by just coming up to the notary office. You will need to send in all of your documents to the notary a few days or maybe even a week in advance for them to review the documents. They'll also do their own due diligence of the property, make sure that everything is in place and that the property can actually be transferred from one owner to another. After that, they will set up an appointment for the actual legalization or notarization of the agreement. And on that day, you will need to present yourself with a set of documents which will be communicated in advance by the notary. You don't need to worry about that right away. Notary will tell you what documents you need to bring. In order for the agreement to be legally binding, it needs to be done in Serbian language. However, if you do not speak Serbian language, you can request to have a bilingual version of Serbian and maybe English or any other language that you can speak and read. One more thing, in case you're not knowledgeable of Serbian language, you need to let the notary know, in which case the notary will request that you secure a court-certified translator for the language that you do speak. The translator will need to be present at the time of the signing because their role is to basically translate to you everything that the notary is saying at the time of signing, and to basically inform you of all the legal requirements and legal implications that come with signing of this type of agreement. Besides the translator, you will need to provide 2 witnesses who are knowledgeable of both Serbian and the other language that is being used at the time of the signing, whose only role is to sign the contract as witnesses attesting to the fact that the translator has indeed informed you correctly of everything that was said at the time of the proceedings. Do bear in mind that if you are in the need of a translator and 2 witnesses, the costs of notarization will increase significantly because you will be covering the costs of witness and the translator themselves. The cost of the translator attending the notarization will largely depend on the language. I can speak from personal experience acquiring a translator for English language. Usually the fees start from 60 euros for each starting hour. For instance, their services are required for 1 hour and 15 minutes. They will charge you for 2 full hours, which would be starting amount of 120 euros. If it's another language, which is a little bit more complicated or is ranked as a more difficult language, then these prices may increase. So again, from personal experience, if you require a translator for French language, those prices may be from 70, 80 euros and upwards for each starting hour. Just to get a rough idea of how much the legalization of the sales and purchase agreement is going to cost, do take into consideration that it will largely depend on the cost of the property, but you can expect to pay somewhere around 500 euros for the notarization or legalization of your sales and purchase agreement. Those costs are always covered by the buyer, not by the seller, so this cost will fall upon you.
So Grading actually organized our appointment at the notary for us. Our notary was located in the main square in Kragujevac. They told us that I only needed to bring my ID. Because I'm now a Serbian citizen, I have a Serbian ID card. But in the case that if you're a foreigner, you'll probably bring your passport. We arrived at the time that we had planned. They asked me whether or not I understood Serbian, to which I replied yes, and whether or not I was able to read Cyrillic, which I can. So without a translator, it costed us 200 euros. But for example, when Žarko bought his property in 2017, this apartment that we're living in right now, it cost him 150 euros at the time. So the cost of the notarization will depend on the parameters of your property. And when it came to the actual signing, we sat down. Across the table was the developer. Because we had decided to pay the total value of the apartment in 4 payments, this notarization was only for the pre-agreement. And in a year's time, in May, we will sign the final contract, which will also involve the final payment and the handing over the keys. Then they read out the key points of our sales and purchase agreement. Points that if I didn't understand in the contract and that I didn't agree to, it would be problematic. So making sure that I understood how much it costs, what dates these payments had to be made, where my apartment was located, who's the actual owner of the apartment, and when it was going to be finished. So when I agreed to all these terms and conditions and that I agreed that I had understood everything, we went and signed all of the papers, and that was it.
If you do require a court-certified translator for the notarization, please consult either the website of the Serbian Ministry of Justice under the section of court-certified translators, where you will be provided with an exhaustive list of translators predominantly working in Belgrade. And if you're needing, for instance, services of a translator in Vojvodina, Vojvodina is the northern province in Serbia, north of Belgrade, above River Danube. If you're interested in buying property in Novi Sad, for instance, or Subotica, those 2 cities are located in Vojvodina. I would suggest that you visit the official website of the Secretariat for the Autonomous Province of Vojvodina. Under the section of services, there is a section court-certified translators, where you can also find an exhaustive list of translators registered for that region. Everything will be done there, so including looking for notaries, looking for translators, everything will be done in Vojvodina. So the links to the list of court-certified translators and notaries will be provided to you in the description box of this video, so you can easily browse and check for, based on the city that you're interested in, you can find either public notary offices or court-certified translators for that particular municipality.
A little bit before this, I had to choose which bank and how I was going to get the payment from Australia to Serbia. We looked and asked a few different banks, if I want to send myself this amount of money, how much commission is the bank going to take in on the Serbian side, and to what amount? For example, go 0.5% of every dollar up until 2,000 euros or something like that. In the end, I decided that I wanted to go with Raiffeisen because it was my bank that I bank with here in Serbia, and that I would do the exchange of AUD to euros in Australia. Commonwealth Bank, which is my bank in Australia, their rate for the AUD dollar was 0.5833, and online the exchange rate is 0.61. So they didn't charge me any additional fees. I was able to convert that money over to euros in Australia and then send euros from that account to my account in Raiffeisen, and neither bank took any fees. So that was really great for me. So I only lost in reality 0.3% on that transfer. If you don't have residency, you will need your white card and your passport. The white card is your address registration here in Serbia. Address registration is something that you have to do within 24 hours of arriving here in Serbia. You will have to do that with the owner of the apartment or the owner of the place that you're staying at. I will put the details on how to register down below. You also have to answer a list of questions. I believe that it's also in English about why it is that you need a bank account here in Serbia. So the day after we signed the contract with Sokolis, we then brought the sales and purchase agreement to the bank, and she asked for my ID card that matched my bank account. If you're a foreigner, it will most likely be your passport. An ID number matches on the sales and purchase agreement and also on your bank account. In my case, it did not. I had opened my bank account with my passport, but then when I became a Serbian citizen, then there was a new ID, and also I got married, so my name also changed. They had to do a quick switch of my account, which only took about 5 to 10 minutes. It's not something that happens often, but it's something that the bank can do. And then they did the transfer of the money from my account to the developer's account there and then in that hour that we were at the bank.
What's going to happen is that there will be a certain tax that would need to be paid by you when you are buying the real estate. There are two potential taxes that you might be eligible to pay, and which depends on whether you are buying a brand new apartment, so something that is currently being constructed and the construction company is then selling it, or whether you're buying something that is already owned by someone who's living there. It's not the first sale. A brand new construction and someone is selling it, then you will be paying VAT, and in other scenarios you would be paying the property transfer tax. The important thing, I believe, for everyone to understand is the possibility to get a tax refund, and that is something to apply only to Serbian citizens, and it is applicable both to the cases when you are paying VAT and cases where you're paying property transfer tax. That is both for old apartments and new apartments. Essentially, it's a sort of a tax cut which is granted to those persons who do not own any real estate yet. So essentially it's supposed to help first-time buyers of their homes to alleviate the financial burden. Essentially, you are given a tax credit which relates to an area of 40 square meters when you are buying a new apartment. Say, for example, you are buying a new apartment and it has, I don't know, 65 meters squared is its area. You will have to pay the VAT, but you will only pay the VAT for 25 square meters, and you will not pay for those 40 square meters. So that is essentially the deduction that is granted to you. And this kind of deduction also applies for cases for property transfer tax. And additionally, if there are some household members who will be living with you, for each household member, you can get additional 15 meters squared of a tax refund. What needs to be understood when it comes to this is you pay the tax and then you make a request to the tax authorities to get the refund, so you get paid that money back. So it's not upfront. There is one fine point that should be taken into account, and that is in case that you were used by someone already from your household who bought an apartment to get that 15 square meters deduction, you won't be able to get that deduction yourself. So in practice, when you, for example, if you have a young married couple who are buying their apartment and neither of them owns any property, so they would both be entitled to that credit. The wife buys the apartment and she says, my husband lives in this household, and if they get that extra 15 square meters deduction on that ground, if the husband then wishes to buy a new apartment on his own, he wouldn't be able to get this deduction. And that is why people often resort to have the spouse buy the apartment separately, get the 40 meter square deduction, and then if the other spouse wants to buy a real estate, they also buy their own apartment, they buy it separately in their own name, and then they can also get the full exemption. This limitation does not apply to children who are below the age of 18. So you can freely add, if you have 1 or 2 small children, and you can say they live within your household, you can get a deduction on their grounds, and one day when they grow up and they want to buy their own apartment, they will be able to get the deduction themselves.
Young expecting couples, or young expecting mothers to be precise, are also eligible for state subsidy in the amount of 20% of the overall value of the property, but not exceeding 20,000 euros, provided that they apply for the subsidy between the moment when their first child is born and the moment when the child turns 1, provided that they do not own prior property on their name in Serbia. So this is something interesting to know and is applicable only to expecting mothers or mothers who have recently given birth in Serbia. Do note that all of this information that we have just given you is up to date with the moment of filming of this video. This information is obviously always subject to change. So for any more in-depth and up-to-date information, it's always best to address your lawyer. The final tax that you will need to take into consideration once you have bought the property is the property tax itself. Basically, at the moment of signing off the sales and purchase agreement, the notary will electronically upload all the documentation pertaining to the sale and send it to all relevant state institutions, one of them being the local state authority tied with the municipality where your property is located. So once these documents have been submitted, you have been registered as the new owner of that property, and the local tax office will automatically send the new property tax decision to you. Property tax is an annual tax paid quarterly. So every 3 months you're expected to pay the amount of property tax, which will ultimately sum up to the total annual amount of property tax that you need to pay. Do bear in mind that property taxes vary depending on the municipality where the property is located, depending on the value of the property, depending on how new the property is, how big the property is. So there's a lot of things to take into consideration when finding the amount of property tax. This is of course not something that you should worry about. This is the tax office who, based on the parameters that they're given, find the amount of your property tax. Finally, if you have any additional questions regarding taxes, you can also call the tax office hotline on the telephone numbers that we will provide you in the description box.
Did you find out whether or not they speak English?
I did not, but I think no.
I wouldn't bet on it.
I wouldn't bet on it.
We would recommend that when it comes to payment of any taxes that need to be paid, and when it comes to getting this deduction, we would advise that you consult with your lawyer and he will guide you through the process.
So that is all from us today. I know it's a very long and detailed video. I hope that it was beneficial and that it gave you more clarity on how to buy property here in Serbia and what that process entails. I know when I was buying a property, I really didn't know what to expect, and it was so overwhelming for me. I hope that this video made it more clearer and made it easier for you, seeing everything step by step of how everything works together, and that it will make the process of buying property here in Serbia easier for you. Now, I would highly recommend finding a lawyer to help you through this process, because it is technically possible to do all of this yourself, but without knowledge of the Serbian language or without knowledge of the Serbian property market, you might miss things that could cost you a lot of money down the line. So just to have peace of mind, definitely employ a lawyer to help you with this process. Now, I will put Alex's and Tamara's contact details down below if there are any additional legal questions that you might have. So good luck, wish you all the best, and see you in the next video.